Okay, I want to check in this morning, get a quick video in discussing Hurricane Hillary and also a number of storms that are brewing out in the Atlantic. I want to check in on that for everybody out there on the East Coast. So let's get started. We're going to do this fairly quickly today to get this out of the way so you guys can have the latest updates. All right, let's bring down the music. Here is Hurricane Hillary over here, very powerful, Category 4 major hurricane. Very impressive, nice eye feature here. Good outflow. You can see the icier clouds out here. Wispy cirrus outflow clouds is indicating good energy distribution within this storm. So very impressive Category 4 major hurricane in the eastern Pacific right now. Let's go ahead and get the latest update from the National Hurricane Center. So we see here Category 4 major hurricane down here, 145 miles per hour sustained winds right here. So that would put it there at Category 4 strength. There will be a hurricane hunter going out there to investigate today to get us the latest readings on it. But for now, the National Hurricane Center keeping it at a major hurricane. As you can see, for the forecast track, continues as a major hurricane through the weekend, and then expected to start to de-intensify, lose some strength by later in the weekend. Here it is impacting Baja California, they expect. Hurricane watches are up. That means hurricane force winds are probable within the next 48 hours, so they'll go ahead and issue that hurricane watch for those areas to make sure they're looking out. And then, as you can see, by Monday morning or overnight Sunday into Monday, coming on shore here, at least that's the forecast track right down the middle here. Of course, it could wobble one of these directions, and we'll talk about that in a second, but expected to impact as a tropical storm by later in the weekend, overnight Sunday into early Monday morning, and then continue on through the southwest and eventually dissipating by Tuesday, early morning, overnight Monday. So that's the latest forecast from the National Hurricane Center. Let's go ahead and look at some of the impacts that are expected from this storm. So checking out the earliest arrival time potentially of tropical storm force winds, and this is a potential scenario, doesn't mean it'll occur. We'll look at the models here in just a second to get an idea of how much confidence we might be able to assign to it coming on shore with sustained winds of at least 39 miles per hour, which is your low end tropical storm force winds. But again, as you can see, earliest potential arrival time sometime around Sunday night, Sunday late afternoon for the southwest, for Southern California. Of course, rare to see these hurricanes come on shore, or these types of storms. Not expected to be a hurricane at landfall in Southern California, but a rare event for Southern California. So there's the earliest possible arrival times for you if you're in that area. Let's look at some other hazards, and these are expected to be a little bit more significant as far as the rainfall. So you can see some potential rainfall totals, forecast, total precipitation totals. You can see here, in the outskirts there of Los Angeles, these orange values, 6 to 10 inches potentially out there. Of course, that's the desert out there, so flash flooding definitely a concern. You can see all of these areas in here, at least 4 inches possible for some of these areas, Central California, and those areas. So definitely a lot of rainfall potentially for this storm. And then you can even see Vegas over here with at least 2 inches, and in some areas greater than that. So definitely lots of impacts expected from rainfall with this storm. Let's go ahead and look at some of the other hazards. So this is definitely probably the most hazardous scenario for this particular storm. As you can see, very high chances of flash flooding down here, at least 70% possible in some of these areas out to the east of San Diego metro area, Los Angeles out there in the desert. So there's very high probability of flash flooding, moderate at least 40% for a very large area of Southern California and the Southwest, including Las Vegas. So at least 40%. Whenever meteorologists say moderate chance of anything, it's a pretty high chance. So definitely flash flooding is a concern with this particular storm. All right, let's just look at what's going on here. So very warm water over the eastern Pacific. 30 degrees Celsius is about 78 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit, maybe even a little higher. I'm not going to do the calculation in my head, but you get the picture. Very warm ocean water that it's currently over. And then it's expected to move into these areas where the temperatures drop quite a bit. So much cooler conditions here for Hillary, and that's expected to decrease the strength of this storm. It's expected to weaken this storm quite a bit as it moves into these cooler waters and then even further into up towards Southern California. This is the cold California current that flows down the Pacific coast, keeps the weather pretty mild for the most part in the western U.S. And so that's going to impact the strength of this storm quite a bit and cause it to weaken. Another factor is wind shear. So those are the two main factors that contribute to the strength of a hurricane. Is a very warm ocean water and a very or wind shear. So light wind shear is light wind shear will mean that the storm can increase in strength, can intensify. And as you can see, not a lot of shear right now over the storm as far as it goes, as far as wind shear is concerned. You can see some of these values over here. So a little bit of shear happening, but really nothing substantial to weaken this storm. What you're looking for actually is the sort of shape of this upper level feature here. It's called a ridge. Ridges are good for storms. It means light upper level winds, and troughs are bad. So this right here is a trough. See the U shape to the wind flow. You can see the arrows in there indicating the streamlines or the mean wind direction, the general wind direction in the upper levels. This is going from 200 millibars down to 850 millibars. So up there about 40,000 feet all the way down to about 5,000 feet or 7,000 feet and thereabouts is the measurement we're looking at, wind shear. So the change in wind direction or speed. So this forecast model charts that out. And then as you can see going forward, as this storm starts to interact with this trough up here, you can see the red values. Lots of southerly wind shear over this storm. See the red values indicating greater than 50 knots of wind shear, so about 55 miles per hour or thereabouts. But by the weekend, you can definitely see that shear is going to start to weaken the storm. So that's Hillary. We just looked at this real quick. The GFS American model, as usual, is more aggressive with this storm. And I'll just go forward in time here. Of course, you can see California down here. Let's go forward. We're looking at winds right now. You can see the winds that are forecasted from Hillary are kind of substantial. I mean, this is 35 knots of wind. So that's tropical storm force wind impacting San Diego and those areas by overnight Monday. This is 03Z, which 7 hours back is 8 o'clock p.m. So night time there for Sunday at 8 p.m. This is 03 or 3 o'clock in the morning in Greenwich, England, where Zulu time is used. But in any case, this is for Sunday night when you might start to feel that wind really picking up. By about Sunday late morning is when the winds could really start to pick up from this storm, and then going forward. Sorry, it's jumping around. You can see some of those values. See the reds in there indicating 35 knots to 40 knots of wind. So definitely something to consider as far as wind is concerned for the American model. However, the ECMWF Euro model is definitely less aggressive with the wind speeds. We'll keep going forward here, and you can see here we are for Sunday morning. You can see it has this storm a little bit further to the east. By that time, the wind's not really picking up too much, like 10 knots or something like that. That's not that substantial. And then by the same time frame, the GFS has the winds around 30 knots. The Euro showing 10 to 15 to 20 knots of wind, which is definitely much less of a concern. And it shows more of the wind impacts being further to the east of LA, and it's in pretty rural areas out here, so not really much of a threat according to the Euro for overnight Sunday into Monday morning, which is when the impacts from the storm will be really the greatest. And then again, showing some wind there in Vegas, but definitely not nearly to the extent of the American. So let's go back real quick and show you this chart again. Again, here's the potential for rainfall for anywhere from 4 to 10 inches for some of these areas. Flash flooding is a concern. And then look at a possible arrival time. We'll use the most aggressive model just to give you the most cautious scenario here. Going to the American again. Let's look at when we might see that rain start to really pick up, those heavier rains associated with tropicals. Here we go. Precipitation type up there. And you see the rain really coming on shore and picking up by, again, overnight. Or this is a Sunday morning, I should say. So might start to see this rain really start to ramp up by Sunday into... Then this is overnight, Sunday night. You start to see these rainfall totals pick up, and then you see sort of lasting throughout the day Monday. So that's the most aggressive scenario. Again, this could be a little less rain than what the American's saying. We'll just check the Euro real quick. Again, here's our rain starting to really pick up Sunday. And then heaviest rainfalls are going to be Sunday night for the Euro, and then into Monday, going into Monday afternoon, evening, and by Monday night, probably start moving off from Southern California. But you see in both models that the rainfall is definitely more significant than, or is significant in both models. So that's agreement or consistency with the model. So rainfall is definitely the big concern with this storm. And we'll see as far as what the winds will do as far as impacts. But flash flooding, definitely a major concern there in these very arid, dry areas like Southern California, Nevada, Western Arizona. So that's the scenario that's of most concern. All right, let's keep going because we're going to try to move through this. But this is what's going on over the Atlantic. So let's go back to over the Atlantic here for our folks over the East Coast and a lot of the followers I have there in Florida. And here's what we're looking at. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 potential disturbances, potential tropicals that could develop according to National Hurricane Center. Let's look at the Euro model and see what it's saying. So you see some of these storms here. Let's go forward and just, there we go. And here we go. So 1, 2, 3, and then another one potentially. Oh, no, I believe this is the one over here. I'm losing track. There's so many. Yeah, there's 1, 2, 3, and then another one over here that potentially may develop in the Gulf of Mexico. And we'll look at that in a second. But let's follow these 3 storms right here. Let's see what the Euro says. Typically the least aggressive model as far as development of these storms. See the three. There's two that are staying out to sea mainly. This is going to be for Monday morning there on the East Coast, or Monday afternoon on the East Coast. I'm doing my conversions from Zulu. There's this storm going to the Caribbean. Here's this other storm you see over here. So not much strengthening according to the Euro going into overnight Monday going forward, and showing potential impacts for Corpus Christi maybe down here into Brownsville, Texas, and right there on the border with Mexico. So definitely not much showing from the Euro. Again, these two guys are staying out to sea by early next week into middle of next week, according to the Euro. And then you start to see something kind of interesting over here with this storm. Sorry. So we'll look at and see what that is. But these two storms still staying out to sea according to the Euro. You see it spinning there. It's under the influence of a ridge right here. See the ridging coming in here. That will keep it to the south of that ridge there, that high pressure that blocks it from going any further north. So that's what's, according to the Euro, influencing it. Here's our two storms out here. No threat to the U.S. By next weekend, according to the Euro. So we are here by, this is next weekend, see, August 27th. So quite a ways out. Quite a ways out. So we got to look at this with skepticism, with a grain of salt as far as this scenario. But you do see, again, way out, some type of potential threat, at least according to the Euro, and at least way out 10 days from now at the maximum extent, or maximum time frame that this model looks at. And so again, we got to look at this with a grain of salt, but we also have to consider it as potentially something to monitor over the next week or so. The GFS shows nothing. GFS doesn't even, maybe has it up here. Let's go back in time and see what the GFS is looking at. So here's our GFS. Here's our three storms, boom, all lined up in a row. African waves that are normal for this time of year. Let's keep going. Here's our storm we were just looking at over here. So agreement with the two main global models, American and Euro, that this storm will develop a little bit. Continuing on, relatively similar position for next week. So there's agreement that between the two models, and we're looking at 5 days. So 5 days, models tend to be, or they're at least much more accurate than at 10 days out. So 5 days, pretty good agreement, meaning definitely a storm that the southeast is going to want to monitor closely over the next few days. And then it sends it out to sea. So the GFS now has it going out to sea. Not as much ridging. See, the ridge is much weaker in here versus the Euro, which had it in here, and that storm sort of spinning over here. So again, this storm potentially something to watch. And moving it off, and nothing after that. So that's the two main globals. Let's look at some of the factors that might contribute to the strengthening. Not seeing much Saharan dust. Seeing some, but over these areas, not much at all, to negligible amounts. So same thing in here. So Saharan dust, which can limit the strengthening of these storms because it's a layer of dry air, and the dust particles filter out the sunlight, so you don't get as much heating for these storms to develop. You need lots of convection, lots of rising air to get all that moisture up into the atmosphere to form clouds in the first place. So Saharan dust, not really a factor right now. Here's what we're looking at, and again, you see from the Climate Prediction Center some of these threats we have right now going into next week, and then see potentially a threat out here for the following weeks. But this again is just kind of picking up on what we're looking at a minute ago in the model. So that's your threats for tropicals. Here's the key down here if you want to follow what's going on the graphic. Tropical cyclone formation probability, and then there you go with those hashed marks showing some potential, and then 40% with the red area. So they do see some potential for development here in the area we're looking at. Okay, one more thing. We're going to go. This is, I always show this. So this is I show this a lot. This is a model that forecasts the amount of rising air versus sinking air in the atmosphere. And we need rising air, again, to get those storms to develop and to get those systems to fire up. And this forecast, it's cut off up here, but this is for a week from now, the 24th. And you see these very dark green areas. These negative values, the stronger the negative value, or the lower the value, the more the less wind shear and the more rising air you can get in these areas. So these are areas of lighter wind shear. Again, light wind shear, lighter winds in the upper levels is something we want for tropical development. And as you can see, that is forecast to be the case for most of these areas here, especially going into the eastern Pacific where we've seen a lot of storms develop. But you see it here in off of Africa where these waves come and then they sometimes intensify. And so showing it next week, green areas all in here, not as strong or not as